The first atomic bomb. Just saying it brings up this huge turning point in history, right?
Absolutely, Hiroshima. That single flash. So many lives lost instantly.
And it forces you, I mean, it really forces you to ask that incredibly tough question. Was it, a price that had to be paid?
A question we still grapple with.
Okay, so let's really get into this because right at the center of it all is this figure, Albert Einstein. Just immense brain power, but also, surprisingly, a lot of personal drama.
Indeed. Albert Einstein. I mean, the name itself is basically shorthand for genius, isn't it? A scientific titan. His ideas completely reshaped our view of the universe.
Totally. But his life story, it's also tangled up with, well, some really intense political times and, frankly, a lot of personal hardship.
He's often tagged as the father of the atomic age. We should probably unpack that a bit later, the nuances of it.
Yeah, good point. But his core work, the theory of relativity, that's just undeniable. It sort of cracked open the atom's secrets, showing that fundamental link between matter and energy. You know the one?
PM some art of percenting. The famous equation.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're drawing on excerpts from the Einstein and Bombs film. It's not just, like, a science lecture.
No, not at all. It's really this compelling human story, this incredible mind facing huge challenges, especially with Hitler's rise.
And how we navigated that, eventually finding, well, a kind of resolution, a personal safe haven, despite everything.
Precisely.
So our mission here, really, is to try and grasp how Einstein's revolutionary scientific ideas bumped up against the world that was, first teetering on the edge of war and then just plunged right into it.
And the very personal cost of all that political chaos on his life, his work, everything.
It's fascinating, actually, to look back at the very first signs of that incredible mind at work, even as a little kid.
Right. He was already wrestling with these really deep questions about how reality works.
There's that great story, isn't there, about the compass when he was maybe 4 or 5?
Yes. That needle just pointing north, always north. It apparently just blew his mind.
It sparked this lifelong fascination, didn't it? With the unseen forces shaping our world. A really profound moment, realizing there's more going on than meets the eye.
And it wasn't just passive wonder. By his early teens, 12 or 13 maybe, he's doing thought experiments.
Like chasing a beam of light in his head.
Exactly. What would happen if you could actually catch up to it? These weren't just daydreams, they were the seeds of relativity.
Wow. That level of abstract thinking, so young. But school wasn't always easy for him, was it?
No, definitely not. You hear these stories, teachers saying he'd never amount to anything.
Right, and another one complaining he wouldn't just accept things, wouldn't be told, and it spoiled the class's respect or something.
Yeah, it paints a picture of someone who didn't quite fit the standard mold.
Yep.
A bit of a rebel.
Which points to something crucial about him, right? This growing distrust of authority.
Absolutely. And a really strong belief that, real breakthroughs, valuable thinking, that only happens when people are free to think for themselves, without dogma.
And he applied that to the universe, too. This conviction that nature, even though it seems complex, could be understood through, well, relatively simple math.
A remarkably elegant idea. And that led him straight to the theory of relativity.
Okay, relativity. It sounds complicated, but the core idea, you're saying it's simpler than it sounds.
Well, the implications are vast, but the starting point. The film uses that example, the balloonist and the person on the ground.
Oh, yeah, with the 2 towers flashing signals.
Oh, precisely. The person on the ground sees the light hit them at the same time, simultaneous.
Makes sense. Equal distance.
But the balloonist, because they're moving, sees one flash before the other. Their motion changes the arrival time.
So, wait. Whether something happens at the same time isn't fixed. It actually depends on who's looking and how they're moving.
That's the revolutionary insight. Simultaneity isn't absolute.
Wow. That's properly mind-bending.
And he pushed it further. Time itself isn't this constant tick-tock for everyone. It's relative. It depends on your speed.
So time can literally stretch or compress, depending on how fast you're going.
Kind of like a flexible fabric, yes. A huge break from Newton's idea of universal clockwork time.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. And the other big piece was the mass-energy thing, EMCF.
Right. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. The key takeaway is that mass and energy are basically interchangeable.
So mass is just stored energy.
Incredibly concentrated energy, yes. Even a tiny bit of mass holds a potentially enormous amount. You just need that massive c-squared factor to unlock it.
Which obviously becomes hugely important later with, the bomb.
Exactly. But back then, when he first published these ideas, what was the reaction? Must have caused a stir.
Oh, definitely. You saw headlines like, "Lights all askew in the heavens." People understood something major was happening.
It felt like Newton's physics was being overthrown. It sparked huge public debate, fascination. Everyone was talking about it.
And Einstein himself, he seemed kind of amused by all the fuss, talking about his overrated faculties.
He had a good sense of humor about it. That famous explanation, the park bench versus the hot stove.
Right. An hour with someone lovely feels like a minute, but a minute on a hot stove feels like an hour. Relativity?
It captures the subjective feel of time perfectly. But yeah, he also saw how it all turned into newspaper clamor, as he put it.
And felt a bit strange being this huge authority figure when he kind of disdained authority.
Exactly. Speaks to his humility, maybe a bit of weariness with the fame already.
But while all this is happening, the scientific revolution, the fame,
Mm-hmm.
the political situation back in Germany is getting really, really dark.
Yeah, the rise of Nazism. It's a crucial context. Hitler was mobilizing disillusioned people, this human flotsam, tapping into this deep anxiety and anger.
A psychic distemper, the source called it.
And it fueled horrific violence, especially aimed at Jewish people.
And Einstein, being Jewish and so prominent, he was a major target.
A huge target. They took away his job, raided his stuff, even his filing cabinet. He was literally made homeless in his own country.
That story about him writing without any for his address in England, just chilling, shows how completely uprooted he was.
And the Nazis put a bounty on his head of 20,000 marks. That's how dangerous they saw him.
Yet he still managed that dark humor, saying he had no idea his head was worth all that. Incredible resilience.
It really is. So he gets out, goes to England, and what does he do? Lives simply. Prefers a tent on a heath, apparently.
Basic food, beer, friends.
Mm.
And someone gave him a pipe to replace the one the Huns stole. It sounds almost rustic.
It highlights how personal the persecution felt, but also his detachment from material things. His principles were what mattered.
Yeah, he was very clear. He'd only live where there was civil liberty, tolerance, equality, none of which existed in Nazi Germany.
And he saw the danger early on, calling Germany a breeding ground of disease, a threat to the world. His pacifism was being severely tested.
It's interesting, too, that even wanting peace and quiet in England, his fame just followed him. The press found him immediately. No hiding.
No hiding. And the attacks weren't just political or personal. They went after his science, too.
Right. That group of 100 Nazi professors declaring his theories wrong.
Declaring them scientific tardism, basically. Outdated Jewish nonsense. Accused him of plagiarism, even. Said it was all a hoax.
Just pure ideology trying to tear down his life's work, calling it a sign of Germany's moral decay. Awful stuff.
But Einstein's comeback was perfect, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Were I wrong, one professor would have been quite enough. Just shuts them down with logic and wit.
Exactly. And he also made that powerful point about his identity.
Yeah, saying he didn't bother being non-Aryan until Hitler made him conscious of it, and being proud to belong to the Jewish people, even if he wasn't religious in a traditional sense, a direct rejection of their racist ideology.
As things got worse in Germany, people started organizing help. The Academic Assistance Council was formed.
To help academics get out, right?
Yeah.
Like Einstein.
Exactly. And Walter Adams from the council asked Einstein to speak out publicly against the Nazis.
But Einstein hesitated at first, worried about Jews still in Germany.
Understandably so. Speaking out could have had terrible consequences for them. It shows how dangerous things were.
But the threat from Hitler just kept growing. Even though some people initially dismissed the Nazis as political no-hopers.
A fatal underestimation. Einstein felt a deep connection to Rathenau, an early victim of Nazi propaganda, which probably sharpened his sense of the danger.
So eventually, he leaves Germany for good, goes on this trip to Japan.
Yes, gave lots of lectures, but apparently got really tired of being photographed constantly, the relentless public eye.
Must have been such a weird contrast, that intense attention on him, while knowing about the terrible suffering back in Germany, the hunger, unemployment, hyperinflation.
A jarring contrast, for sure. Then he arrives in New York, and reporters bombard him with, well, silly questions.
Inane questions, the source says. But underneath, he knew how serious the political situation was, even if he initially thought Hitler's power might fade if the economy improved.
Which sadly didn't happen.
So, 1933, he and his wife moved to the U.S. permanently. Say goodbye in Pasadena.
And then their summer place back in Germany gets raided by the Nazis. That really sealed it. No going back to that political circus, as he called it.
And the Nazi propaganda just kept hammering away at him. Horrible images. Even that threat not yet hanged.
Just vile. And such a contrast to his early desire for just quiet work. He was forced onto the world stage.
And he didn't stay silent. He slammed the rest of the world for being too passive about Nazi barbarism. He saw that Hitler meant war.
Which created this immense internal conflict for him, being such a committed pacifist.
Right. How do you stay pacifist when faced with, well, with fascism?
He eventually decided his anti-fascism had to be unconditional. He came to believe that you could only resist organized force with organized force, a huge shift for him.
He felt guilty about staying silent, like he'd be complicit.
Deeply so, it seems. Which led to that big meeting they organized at the Albert Hall in London.
To raise money for German Jewish refugees, with Einstein as the main speaker.
A major event. Though not without controversy, the Daily Mail criticized it as basically an anti-Hitler rally.
Shows the different opinions even then. But the meeting itself was a huge success.
Overwhelmingly so. 10,000 people turned up.
And his speech, it sounds like it was incredibly moving. He thanked people, but didn't just bash Germany.
No, he focused on the bigger picture, saving humanity, our cultural heritage, warning against hatred.
And championing freedom, right, intellectual freedom, individual freedom. Mentioning Shakespeare, Goethe, Newton, Pasteur, showing what freedom allows us to achieve.
Yes, stressing how vital that freedom is. And remarkably, he still held on to some hope, suggesting the crisis might somehow lead to a better world eventually.
Incredible optimism, really, given the circumstances.
Yeah.
So autumn 1933, he lands at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. A new beginning.
Heading their school of mathematics, a kind of sanctuary. The director there knew how incredibly lucky they were, calling him one of the ranking scientists of all time.
Must have felt strange, though. That peaceful academic bubble in Princeton, while the world outside was just spiraling.
Apparently he did feel a bit uneasy, almost guilty, being in relative peace while others suffered so much.
And he kept speaking out against Hitler's rearming, the crushing of rights. Then came Kristallnacht.
The night of the broken glass, just horrific confirmation of the escalating persecution. And right around then, a huge scientific breakthrough happens in Germany.
They split the uranium atom.
Exactly. And suddenly, the scientific community in the U.S. is thinking, uh-oh, they're connecting the dots back to Einstein's impermanence.
Realizing that an atomic bomb might actually be possible. And what if Hitler gets it first?
That specific fear, that palpable anxiety, that's what led Einstein to write that incredibly important letter to President Roosevelt.
Urging him about uranium, the potential for these extremely powerful bombs, telling the U.S. they needed to speed up their own research.
The timing was critical. The Nazis invade Poland, France falls, they grab uranium from Belgium. The threat felt incredibly real.
Then Pearl Harbor happens. The U.S. is fully in the war. The stakes are even higher.
Which is why the Allies put so much effort into disrupting any German bomb program, like those raids in Norway.
And eventually they found out the German program hadn't actually succeeded. Huge relief.
A massive relief. But as the Allies pushed into Germany, they uncovered the concentration camps, Buchenwald, places like that.
The sheer horror of it. That really cemented Einstein's break with Germany, didn't it? Irrevocably.
Absolutely. The scale of the inhumanity was just unimaginable.
So, the war in Europe ends, Hitler's gone. But the war in the Pacific rages on, and the Manhattan Project succeeds.
Leading to Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And afterwards, Einstein looked back,
Yeah.
and he had regrets.
Deep regrets. He famously called signing that letter to Roosevelt the one great mistake of his life.
Driven by that fear, that desperate fear that the Germans would get the bomb first.
Exactly. He said, had I known that the Germans would not succeed, I would not have taken part in opening that Pandora's box.
Wow. Such a heavy burden to carry.
It really is. He did argue his role was indirect, establishing the principle, impermanence, not building the bomb itself. He hadn't foreseen atomic energy being unlocked in his lifetime.
But still, the weight of it. And the other physicists involved felt it too. That responsibility, the guilt.
Immensely so. It was a heavy burden for many of them.
And the hope for lasting peace after the war.
Yeah.
It kind of fizzled out, didn't it? New tensions arose.
Sadly, yes. The post-war world wasn't the peaceful era everyone had hoped for. Einstein warned about power-hungry politicians, about how easily science could turn into a nightmare.
That quote about science being childlike compared to reality, but still the most precious thing we have.
It's so profound.
It captures that duality perfectly. The potential for wonder and the potential for destruction.
And his final message was one of hope, wasn't it? For a future that's more just, more peaceful, more rational.
A plea for humanity to match its scientific progress with moral progress. A vital message. So wrapping up this deep dive, it's just an incredible story. Einstein's sheer genius, side by side with the terrible impact of the Nazis forcing him out, his unintended role in the atomic age.
Absolutely. His scientific journey is inseparable from his personal one, a story of brilliance, persecution, resilience, and ultimately finding refuge and continuing his work in the U.S. That's the happy ending part, if you will, despite the later shadows.
Yeah, it really shows how science, politics, individual lives, they're all tangled together. Even the greatest minds aren't separate from the storms of their time.
Which leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Given Einstein's genius and his profound regret about the bomb, what responsibility do scientists have for where their discoveries might lead?
That's a huge question. Or maybe, how does Einstein's story, his struggles against Nazism, his fight for freedom, how does that inform how we think about academic freedom and the dangers of persecution even today? Lots to chew on there.